The Calendar, How Luisa Received the Gift, from the Book of Heaven Volume 1, by Luisa Piccarreta. Part 9. See how I will do it. I will put you between my justice and the iniquities of the creatures, and when my justice sees itself full of iniquities to the point of not being able to contain them, and is forced to send the thunderbolts of the scourges in order to chastise the creatures, in finding you in the middle, instead of striking them, it will strike you. Only in this way will I be able to content you in sparing men, not otherwise. I remained all confused, I didn't know what to say. My nature would do its part, being frightened and trembling, but I saw that my good Jesus was waiting for an answer, whether I accepted or not. So, seeing myself almost forced to speak, I said to him, "Oh, my most divine spouse, on one hand I would be ready to accept, but how is it going to work with the confessor, if he does not want to come every once in a while? How can it be possible that he will come every day? Free me from this cross, that the confessor be needed in order to free me, and then everything will be arranged between me and you." Then the Lord said to me, "Go to the confessor and ask him for the obedience. If he wants, you will tell him everything I told you, and you will follow whatever he says. See, it will not be only for the good of creatures that I want these continuous sufferings, but also for your good. In this state of sufferings I will purify your soul thoroughly, in such a way as to dispose you to form a mystical marriage with me, and after this, I will make the last transformation, in such a way that both of us will become like two candles placed on the fire, one is transformed into the other and they form a single one. In this way I will transform myself in you, and you will remain crucified with me. Ah! Would you not be happy if you could say, 'The bridegroom is crucified, but the bride also is crucified'? Ah! Yes, there is nothing that renders me dissimilar from him." So, when I was able to speak with the confessor, I told him everything that the Lord had said to me, and since the Lord had said to me those words, for a certain given time, without notifying me of the exact time during which I was to suffer continuously, I took it as about 40 days, more or less. And now it has been about 12 years that I continue to be in it. But may God be always blessed, may his inscrutable judgments be always adored. I believe that if the blessed Lord had made me understand clearly the length of time I was to be in bed, my nature would have been frightened very much, and would hardly have submitted itself to it. Although I remember that I have always been resigned, at that time I did not know the preciousness of the cross. As the Lord has made me know during the course of these 12 years, nor would the confessor have adapted himself to give me the obedience. So I said to the confessor that the Lord wanted him to give me the obedience to remain in continuous suffering for about 40 days, and I told him all the rest. To my surprise, because I thought it was impossible, the confessor told me that if it was really the will of God he would give me the obedience, because, in reality, it was not that he could not come, but rather, a little bit of human respect. My soul rejoiced very much, for I would be able to make the Lord content, and therefore have creatures spared, but my nature was very much afflicted in receiving this obedience, so much so, that for a few days I was very saddened. My soul also was affected very much, thinking that I was to remain for such a long time without being able to receive Jesus in the sacrament, my only and sole comfort. At times I would feel a war so very fierce within me, that I myself did not know what had happened to me. The devil too would add many things, but my good Jesus put a remedy to everything, and this is how he did it. By order of the current confessor, I move on to speak about something else. I will obey in manifesting the various ways in which the Lord has spoken to me, it seems to me that the ways in which the Lord has spoken to me are four, but these four ways of Jesus speaking are very different from inspirations. 1. The first way is when the soul goes out of herself. However, first I want to explain a little bit better about this going out of myself. It happens in two ways. The first is instantaneous, almost in a flash, and it is so sudden that it seemed to me that the body would lift a little bit from the bed in order to follow the soul, but then it would stay there. And it seemed to me that the body would remain as dead, while the soul would follow Jesus, walking throughout the whole universe, the earth, the air, the seas, the mountains, purgatory and heaven, where many times he showed me the place where I will be after I die. The other way, then, for the soul to go out, is more quiet. It seems that the body dozes off insensibly and remains as though petrified at the presence of Jesus Christ. However, the soul remains with the body, and the body no longer feels anything of external things, even if all the universe turned upside down, even if they burned me up and reduced me to pieces. These two ways, so different, of going out of myself, I have noticed sensibly, because in the first way, having to obey the confessor when he would come to wake me up, I would see him from the place where Jesus would lead me, that is, from the ends of the earth, or of the air, or of the mountains, or of the sea, or of purgatory, or even of heaven itself. Even more, it would seem to me that I would not have the time to let the confessor find my soul in the body, and therefore I would not be able to obey. It seemed that, so far away as I was with my soul, it seemed to me, that I would bustle about, and become all anxious and worried that I might not be able to let myself be found there by the confessor in time, and therefore I would not be able to obey. However, I confess that I have always been there in time, and it seemed to me that my soul would enter my body before the confessor would begin to give me the obedience to wake up. Even more, I tell the truth, many times, from afar, I could see the confessor coming, but in order not to leave Jesus, it seemed that I would not be thinking that the confessor was coming. But then Jesus himself would hurry me to return with the soul into my body so as to be able to obey the confessor. And then I would feel great reluctance about leaving Jesus, but obedience would win, and upon leaving Jesus, he himself either kissed me or embraced me, or would do something else to take leave of me. And I, upon leaving my dear Jesus, would say to him, I go to the confessor, but you, my good Jesus, come back soon as the confessor goes away. These are, then, the two ways in which the soul seemed to go out of the body, and in these two ways in which the soul goes out, God speaks to me. This way of speaking he himself calls intellectual speaking. I will try to explain it. After the soul has gone out of the body, finding herself before Jesus, she has no need of words in order to understand what the Lord wants to tell her, nor does the soul need to speak in order to make herself understood, but through the intellect. Oh, how will we understand each other when we are together? From a light that comes from Jesus into my intellect, I feel everything that my Jesus wants to make me understand being impressed within me. This way is very high and sublime, so much so, that the nature can hardly adapt itself to explain it with words, it can barely give a few ideas. This way of Jesus of making himself understood is extremely rapid. In one simple instant one learns many sublime things, more than by reading entire books. Oh, what a most ingenious teacher Jesus is! In one simple instant he teaches so many things, while it would take entire years for someone else, if he manages at all, because the terrestrial teacher does not have the power to draw the will of his disciple, or to infuse things in his mind without effort and toil. But not with Jesus. His sweetness, the loveliness of his gesture, the gentleness of his speaking are so great, and then he is so beautiful, that as soon as the soul sees him, she feels so drawn that sometimes the speed with which she runs after Jesus is so great, that almost without realizing it, she finds herself transformed into the beloved, in such a way that the soul is no longer capable of distinguishing her terrestrial being, so much is she identified with the divine being. Who can tell what the soul feels in this state? It would take Jesus himself, or a soul perfectly separated from the body, because in finding herself surrounded once again by the wall of this body, and losing that light which before kept her submerged, the soul loses very much and remains obscured. So, if she tries to say something, she can do it only roughly. To give an idea, I will say that I imagine one born blind, who has never had the good of seeing what is contained in the entire universe, and who, for a few minutes, had the good of opening his eyes to the light and were able to see everything that is contained in the world, the sun, the heavens, the sea, the many cities, the many machines, the varieties of flowers and the many other things that are in the world, and who, after those few minutes of light, return to the blindness of before. Now, could he describe, distinctly, everything that he has seen? He could give a rough outline, and say a few things confusedly. Now, something similar happens when the soul finds herself separated, and then back into the body. I don't know whether I am saying nonsense, but just as that poor blind one would remain but with the sorrow of the lost sight, the same for the soul. She lives moaning and almost in a violent state, because the soul feels always violently drawn toward the highest good. The attraction toward himself that Jesus leaves in the soul is so great, that the soul would like to remain always attracted within her God. But this cannot be, and therefore she lives as if she lived in purgatory. I add that the soul has nothing of her own in this state, everything is operation done by the Lord.